Welcome to Peace, Freedom, and Joy for Changemakers. I am your host, Michelle Vandehay, and today's 5-minute message is mindfulness is a learnable leadership skill. Two important things with that right away. One is that it's a learnable skill. Mindfulness is a learnable skill. The second part of that is it's a leadership skill. When you can learn to be more mindful for yourself, you are going to elevate your leadership capabilities and you're going to be a model for the folks that you are leading. Today, I have notes with me and I have definitions. And so we are going to start with some information and do a little storytelling. So in 2022, according to the American Psychological Association, 1 in 4, so 25% of US adults said that most days they are so stressed they cannot function. That was 2022. And I would argue that it's probably similar now. Is that you? Consider that. And maybe you're not at the point that you're so stressed out that you can't function, but you're stressed out that you're barely hanging on by a thread. And so we want to talk about that today with mindfulness. I'm going to share the definition of mindfulness from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Mindfulness is the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences. I talk about this with my clients all the time. This is the foundational work that I work with in my clients and many in seminars. One of the things I talk about is being aligned with your authentic self versus your conditioned self. And one of the cornerstones of knowing that you are in your authentic self is that you are being non-judgmental. It's that you're being curious as opposed to being judgmental or placing blame. You're practicing having this awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and experiences and not judging them, which it can be very difficult. That's why mindfulness is a practice and it's a skill. It's something you can learn. According to the American Psychological Association, mindfulness is the awareness of one's internal states and surroundings. Mindfulness can help people avoid destructive or automatic habits and responses by learning to observe your thoughts, emotions, and other present moment experiences without judging or reacting to them. But what I like about how the APA says that it's awareness of one's internal states and surroundings. And that's why this topic we're going to do in two parts. And the second part, we're going to really dive into the internal states. Something else that when I was doing a little bit of my research with this, I was like, what's the opposite of mindfulness? I feel like I've never heard anyone talk about it. And I truly didn't know. So what's considered the opposite of mindfulness? So what I did is I asked Google, what's the opposite of mindfulness? And I went to Merriam-Webster was one of the links, and I went to the antonyms. So the opposites of mindfulness. And the top 4 words that came up were neglect, disregard, unawareness, and obliviousness, which I love that word. That is fun to say. So I looked up the definition of neglect then from Merriam-Webster, and neglect is the state of being unattended to or not cared for. So this is coming full circle now. The reason I was curious about what is the opposite of mindfulness is because if folks are like, well, what's the purpose of being mindful? What happens if I'm not being mindful? Then you may be in a state of neglect. You may be in a state of not being cared for. And that is the epitome of everything I talk about, prioritizing yourself, empowering your mission. And that when we're not being mindful, oftentimes that means that we're not being cared for. And mindfulness is something you do for you. And this is where it's a leadership skill is when you're being mindful and when you can bring mindfulness practices into your organization, into your mission, then it helps everyone that you're working with. It helps the people that you're serving. It helps volunteers, staff, whoever else that you're working with within your organization to also feel cared for, to also feel like they're being attended to. So wouldn't you want a mindfulness practice to be an everyday or at least a regular occurrence for you and for the people that you're working with and for your staff and for your team, especially because this quote that I often bring up with yoga is that oftentimes our experiences either do one of two things. Our experiences, anything that we're going through, either takes us away from ourselves or it brings us back toward ourselves. And mindfulness is an opportunity to come back to yourself because it's not that you're practicing the awareness of your thoughts. It's because you're doing it in a non-judgmental space. And that's what brings you back towards yourself. Because if you're being judgmental about who you are, or what you're doing, that's taking you away from yourself. That's taking away from your true essence and your true being. We want to bring you back to yourself. And I want to share one thing before we finish today, as you're starting to contemplate this. And that's why I'm a huge fan of trauma sensitive yoga. There's many ways, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what trauma sensitive yoga can really help with and lead into the part two of this, but that we're doing it on an ongoing basis, especially if you're doing work that is stressful, that you're working with people in crisis, in trauma a lot, because you don't want to take those things on as compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and or burnout, because then you're not able to continue to do the work that you want to do and make the big impact that you want to make and do it long term. One of the things you can do, one of the most common things, and that even like our therapist has worked with us on as a mindfulness practice, that's a very simple thing to remember. One of the things you can do to come back to yourself is look around in your space and say, what are 5 things I see? What are 4 things I hear? What are 3 things that I feel with like physical touch? What are 2 things that I smell? What is 1 thing that I'm tasting? And so it's using your senses to help you to be in awareness of your surroundings. So this, it can be powerful in and of itself. And you can do this in whatever order you want. It's supposed to be like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can do see, hear, feel, smell, taste. Usually taste and smell are 1 and 2 because there's only so much you can taste and smell at one time. Here's the thing with this, and this is where this is part 1, is this can be powerful in and of itself. My argument for why it may not be enough is this is all external stuff. And the external stuff is important. And sometimes this is like that first step. This is the gateway into mindfulness and becoming aware of your own internal states. Because if we're not even aware of our external things or things that are going on around us, it can be difficult for you to become aware of your internal states. The reason why internal states can be more challenging is because based on neuroscience and trauma, whether it's your own trauma or someone else's trauma that you're experiencing through vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue, our brain can be switched off and we can turn off those internal sensations that help us to feel our internal states. We're going to talk about this a little bit in part 2. Where I want to finish with this in part 1 is that mindfulness is a learnable skill. It is a leadership skill. It is so important for you if you are leading, whether you're leading yourself or you're leading a team of hundreds or thousands, or you're leading a mission, even if it's by yourself, but you're serving other people. You are a leader, and this is very important for you. If you're not used to being in a state of mindfulness, doing this external exercise can be really helpful for you and can be that first step. Oftentimes, it's not quite enough, especially if you're in a heightened state of anxiety, worry, anger, and often, or if you're helping people in crisis often, you need something more than that. You need to be able to get inside your body so that you're not yelling or doing something that could hurt other people. I just finished listening to the book, My Grandmother's Hands. Oh my gosh. If you have not read or listened to that book, everybody needs to listen to that book, especially he talks about a lot about police brutality and death by police officers and how oftentimes they are being triggered into what he calls your reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is taking the actions. And that is how this brutality is happening. That's why people are dying. And so we need to work on feeling those felt senses within our body so we can slow ourselves down, so you can become more mindful not just of the external, but of the internal, so that not only is it beneficial for you, it can truly save lives. And the more we focus on this mindfulness, the more we can really make a huge impact on the world. And I truly wholeheartedly believe this. So I'm curious, have you ever thought of mindfulness as a learnable skill? Have you ever thought of mindfulness as a leadership skill and how important it is as a leader? If you're not part of the Facebook group, Peace, Freedom, and Joy for Changemakers, it's in the show notes, or you can look it up on Facebook. You're always welcome to email me or send me a DM on social media platforms, wherever we are connected. I can't wait to chat with you all in the next episode and part 2. Always remember that you are worth it.